Good evening and welcome to Kidlit Live. I'm Arden Jones. I just want to say thank you to everybody who will be tuning in tonight and watching this. Unfortunately, last week I wasn't quite up to it. I was just sort of getting over COVID and felt really tired by the evenings and was just like crashing at like 8, 9 o'clock. So it wouldn't have been the best show. Plus, I was so bunged up, it just wouldn't have sounded good. So thankfully, Stuart has agreed to and is coming on this evening, so I'm so grateful, and I'm so grateful to everyone that's going to watch. So like I said, tonight I have Stuart White, and he is an author of his YA book, The Nameless, and Ghosts of Mars, The Adventures of Eve and Night, and he's also the founder of WriteMentor. And I speak about WriteMentor a lot, as everyone probably knows, and I'm just so grateful to have found them. They are such an amazing organisation with a brilliant community of writers who are the most supportive people. And without WriteMentor, I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have found my agent, well, definitely not yet. I had a one-to-one with her, through WriteMentor, but I wouldn't have got to the stage that I am without their input and their support. So I will be forever thankful to Stuart and the WriteMentor team. They are amazing. So I'm going to bring Stuart on now, and we'll have a chat about WriteMentor and his books and lots more. So do join in and stay tuned and share and tell everybody about it. Hi, Stuart.
Hiya, good evening. How are
Hello.
you?
Yes, really good. Thank you. So much better. It's funny that you had COVID, then I had COVID, and now
Yeah,
we're here. So,
we made it though.
yeah. Oh, so anyway, I know I'd said beforehand, I'm just so grateful to you for coming on and also coming on earlier, due to some personal reasons that I needed to do the show a bit earlier. So thank you very much. I do really
No worries.
appreciate that. I can see there's already people joining. I don't know if you could see people watching. So that's really good. I can't see people on Twitter. So hello, people on Twitter. I can't see your numbers. If you want to ask any questions or just say hi, you need to do it over on the YouTube channel, which is at Arden Jones Author. Um, so I'll get started now, Stuart, because what I always ask everybody when they first come on is about their writing. So have you always known that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I often hear about people who talk about having a love for writing from a very young age, and they wrote their first story about dragons when they were in nursery or primary school or something along those lines. I wasn't really like that, to be honest. When I was younger, I was into a lot of different things. I read a bit, but I wouldn't say I was like a voracious reader. I definitely didn't write that much. And even in my teens, I think that I don't know if other people ever found this, but I felt like with the examination element of the English subject at school and the amount of like compulsory reading you had to do and essay writing and so on, I found that sort of pushed me a little bit further away from storytelling and reading and so on than I'd like. And it was really only as a later teen when I didn't particularly my childhood was fine, but I didn't particularly always feel like my house was a particularly warm place at times. So I spent a lot of time, weirdly enough, in my attic. I had a boarded attic, and I would climb up there with my copy of Lord of the Rings and sit and read. I think it was a coping mechanism, but I'd sit up there and I'd read the book over and over and over again, and I really fell in love with that book. And I think that as I went on to university and so on, more and more I started becoming filled with ideas for alternative stories set, mostly fan fiction set in that universe and in that world
Oh,
that Tolkien had created. And it wasn't until I started reading more widely as I did at university and beyond that I realised that. So, for example, YA wasn't really a thing when I was younger. So I didn't read what would I guess be termed now as a YA book when I was a kid. In fact, I didn't really read middle grade. I read most of the
yeah, I
books in
can't
our house
remember
were
going from
adults.
child to adult. That's exactly the same as me, actually. I don't remember much in that in between. I remember like going from the naughtiest girl in the school books to Virginia Andrews in like no time whatsoever.
Yeah, and I don't think books are, or maybe they were, but and I didn't notice, but I don't think books were ever classified that way for me. And so, you know, what my mum had in her bookshelf was what I saw as books, and so maybe they didn't appeal to me. But yeah, as I got older and you know started to go into my 20s and stuff, and I realised that I could read other things, and there was other things available. I started to read a lot more, and I got really into YA, especially in my 20s. You know, that was around about the time where it started to grow a bit bigger, and yeah, it was around about then that I thought, well, actually, I'd quite like to tell my own stories. You
Hmm.
know, probably, and that's why I thought I'd want to be a children's writer because I loved that that age range of stories rather than adult stories. And yeah, and then I started. It was actually I was a big sports person when I was younger. I played various different sports, but it was when I was in my mid 20s and I got a really bad knee injury on my knee, and I had to have an operation. I was on crutches, you know, off work for 6 weeks and so on. It was then that I started writing. And funnily enough, you know, as much as I miss playing sport and playing rugby and so on, that was the launch pad that sort of, you know, like the inciting incident, if you like, of my life where it launched me towards writing. And you know, and obviously I've not looked back since. And fallen more and more in love with the process, with the craft, with and this is I think probably most people that know me know this. I love analysing and dissecting storytelling and the life of being a writer and the impact that it has and the enriching elements that it does. You know, it does for us in not just in terms of like storytelling and you know. Punching keys so that you produce a document on Microsoft Word, but more the the parallels with storytelling and how they are so parallel with the things that happen in our own lives as well. And yeah, it's as I say, it's something that I've completely fallen in love with since. And it came from an origin where there wasn't really necessarily that inspiration to do it.
Hmm.
And you know, and it's just funny how these things happen. And I know that a lot of people talk about you know being obsessed from a young age, but I don't think it was that way with me, and I've come to it a little bit later.
Like that, yeah, I think it's so amazing, like talking to so many different people and having that, listening to these experiences. Like I'd imagine that you've heard so many, from obviously being within WriteMentor. But I find it just so interesting that, but you've always had a love for books. That has always been there, whether or not it was writing, but just being involved in those stories and now telling them.
Yeah.
It's just a brilliant journey. It's an amazing journey that just gives you so much happiness. It can be very stressful at times, but it's so fulfilling to have something in you and get it out. It's I mean I can't even explain it. It's just I feel like
There's
it's a
a
need.
yeah, oh, definitely. There's definitely a need there, and there's a beautiful quote about writing, which is that if you don't write, if you're not a writer and you don't read, then you only live one life. But you know, if you're a writer or a reader, then you get to live thousands of lives.
I love
And
that.
yeah, and it's stuff like that that makes me realize how fortunate I am that you know I have the means and the physical health and so on to be a writer and to also buy plenty of books and read lots of different stories. So yeah, I feel always feel very grateful in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, me too. There is something special about just having, like you said, but being involved in so many different stories, whether as a reader, just being in those worlds and experiencing all those different experiences that you might not ever think of in your head, but someone else has, and that's it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's yeah. Um, and what else is amazing, because I read this before I was an ARC reader from a very early on, and I loved this book so much. So you self-published this. This is your
yes.
debut, isn't it? So it's a middle grade novel called Ghosts of Mars: The Adventures of Eve and Night. Um, I mean, it's just a gorgeous cover, but we'll talk about that as well in a moment. So could you tell us a little bit more about this and what your inspiration was for writing The Ghosts of Mars?
Yeah, so Ghost of Mars, it's a middle grade story set on Mars, as the title suggests. It's a future colony, so something I tried to set it as a mid range future. So rather than going too far into the future that none of us will ever see, I thought let's try a time where we could potentially get to the point of colonizing Mars, but within our own lifetimes. So it's set in the 2050s, and um, or around about that period. And Eva Knight is the first human to be born on Mars. So, people have lived there obviously for a few years before she's born, but her mum gets pregnant while, her and her husband are on Mars there, and obviously she has to give birth. And there's a whole lot of complications. I mean, I'm a biology teacher by day my day job, and there's a whole massive set of complications, both in terms of the biology, but also the physics of trying to go through a pregnancy, but also delivery and stuff on that planet. Anyway, all that aside, I don't go into that in the book, but all that aside, it's remarkable that anyone would be born on Mars. And so I wanted to chart this story about a little girl who grew up on a planet away from Earth. She's never been there. She faces all sorts of prejudices because she is a Martian essentially, not she's I guess a half human, half Martian, but and I wanted to explore as well the impact that would have on a person having, being a human but having never seen Earth, whereas almost everyone else in the colony has, and they've chosen to move to Mars, whereas she was born there. And one of the complications of being born on a different planet with different atmospheric pressures and gravity and so on is that your physical development is different. So that's your internal organs and your muscles and everything else. So she faces all those challenges as well. And they ultimately mean that she technically can't leave Mars without it being a huge risk. And certainly she can't go to Earth because our gravity and pressure and stuff so much stronger. It would effectively crush her organs and her systems. So I just thought it would be fun to explore a character like that was trapped in a place that so many other people go to as an escape from our planet. And so there's loads of conflict there from that point of view. She also has type 1 diabetes, which is a condition I have, and I wanted to explore that not as a I wanted a story with a disabled main character, but it wasn't about the disability or the struggle with that disability. It was more that she just happens to have it, and she's a really strong, determined, stubborn at times character who just doesn't allow anything to keep her down, and she overcomes all of those difficulties throughout the story. And I think I wrote it at a time in my life when my daughter was a bit younger, and I hoped that I would have it published by the time she got to the reading age for the story. And so that was a big motivation and inspiration for me, which is why I decided to self-publish that one first.
Oh wow, that what a journey that was. And I don't know what, when you said about, representation across the board is just so important, isn't it? And like you said, I love how that the Eva story isn't about her having type 1 diabetes. I mean, there are elements about the struggles that she does have with it. She has to make sure that she, gets her medication and stuff like that. But it's not about, like you said, it's not about her having that, but she just has it, and she's a person, or half Martian, who has that condition. But the story is not that. It's not about that. And I just think it's so important that there are children out there that may have disabilities, and they can just go, oh, finally a book that's not just about how special I am or how different I am, but just accepts me for me. And I think that is how you wrote the story is really amazing, and just really, I mean, my eldest daughter has a disability, and I would say she's 20 now, so growing up there was not anything that she would have seen herself in, and it's really difficult, especially as someone who is an avid book reader like me, to never be able to really find anything that quite fitted her. So for you to write this, it really got me anyway. I was so grateful to you to do that, but it means a lot to you as well. So
Yeah, it's good to have, and I think it's a really positive representation as well of the condition,
yes.
and it does, and I hope that kids who, because I was diagnosed a little bit older with type 1 diabetes, but a lot of children are diagnosed with it, from almost from birth, when they're 1, 2, 3 years old, and they've never known anything else in their life, and it can feel like they have pumps put in and so on. I've been lucky again. I can manage the condition as an adult quite well, but for young kids, they have to have pumps put in and so on. And one of the things, and I know we're going to talk about the cover in a minute, but the one of the things that I made sure that we had on the cover was the actual insulin pump. So
Yeah,
if you look at the cover, you can see, and technically it doesn't actually make sense for insulin pump to be outside our spacesuit, but we made sure that we got that on there because it's
yeah,
good to have that visible representation for, kids that might be a bit self-conscious about having the insulin pump.
absolutely. Yeah, and again, like it's just it's so important for them kids to see that and just feel accepted and be recognised and be seen. It's yeah, great choice to have it on show, and also a great choice to go to have Jen Jameson illustrate it. I actually met her recently at the um, Kidlit picnic that Stephen Lenton put on, and she was lovely, and we got on really well when we chatted about your book. So that was really lovely. So can you just tell us a little bit about what it was like working with Jen, what it's like working with an illustrator, especially when it comes to self-publishing, because it's completely different working with an illustrator or someone who works on the cover, or anybody when it comes to traditionally publishing. I think we know a little bit more about that, but when it comes to self-publishing, it's so interesting that you get to choose who you want, who's right for the book, and you have that communication with them. So just could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so when I was looking for, so first of all, I made the decision when I was going to self-publish that, um, although there are a lot of expenses associated with it, such as hiring a good editor, hiring a good illustrator. So I just thought that that wasn't going to be something I'd compromise on in terms of the money involved. And I'm actually going to talk about this a little bit later on in the self-publishing tips, but I think that's so important because people very much judge your book by the cover, and it's important that that's the best possible version or representation of your story that it can be. So yeah, when I was doing the search for it, I actually searched quite widely for people. I put out a lot of posts on social media, for example. I went into a lot of the illustration agencies' websites and had a look through their client list, and so on. And I actually, there were a few people that I found and looked at their profiles, but the moment Jen responded to my Facebook post asking for an illustrator if anyone would be interested, and then I clicked on her portfolio link to her website. I knew immediately that she was the person that I wanted to illustrate the cover. She and this is maybe a good hint if you are an illustrator, is I don't think at that point she'd illustrated any middle grade covers, that should be commissioned for. I don't think, I might be wrong about that, but there wasn't any on her website anyway. But she had made mock-ups of middle grade covers. So I think she'd taken one of the Philip Pullman books and done her own take on the cover.
Oh, that's cool.
And so yeah, and there was quite a few examples on there. And so for me as someone who was looking to commission her to do the cover, it was very easy for me to decide to go with her because I'd seen how she had approached it with other projects. The details and the definition she had in the characters. Also the how she aged the characters, because that was important that because the character was going to be in the front, that she looked at the appropriate age for the reader
Yeah.
that I was going to be targeting. Because sometimes when I see illustrated books, I'm like, that kid on the front of that book doesn't look like the right age for that book. Sometimes they look a bit too old or a bit too young or
Mhm.
whatever. So anyway, I wanted to make sure I got that right. And when I contacted her, she was great. I had to go through her agency to do it all, properly and officially, and we had to work up a contract and negotiate a fee and all that stuff. And that, it's the same thing. Even if you're self-publishing, you still have to go through the same steps that a publisher would in order to hire someone. And when we agreed on it, I showed her a few mock-ups in Canva that I'd made, which were terrible. I, I think she did a blog post actually where she compared that first one to what she
Oh,
finally
really?
produced.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
gonna go and have a read.
yeah. If you go into her Substack, I think it's on there. So, yeah, it's quite. My first one's quite embarrassing, but anyway, she did a great job of it, and obviously, she produced the final cover there. But yeah, the whole process was a joy working with her. She was very communicative. She gave me lots of updates. Every phase as she went through it, from the very first sketches all the way through to the finished cover, she was constantly sharing things with me and asking for input. And I think for me anyway, I'm definitely a control freak, or as as Melissa calls me, a control enthusiast. And so I do like to, have a bit of control over that. And I think if I'd traditionally published that book, I I don't think I would have been. I might have been happy with the end result, but I don't think I would have enjoyed not being in the loop as much as I
Hmm.
was with this. So there's a big advantage to going down that route. There are of course disadvantages, but a big advantage is how involved you are. And as I say, it was like I met Jen last year at a conference, and she's not only a brilliant artist, she's a lovely person, and I got really lucky when she replied to my post.
Yeah, well, I love it. It's just the cover. It really stands out, and like you said, it's really important for it to when you're self-publishing. It's so important to have a cover that stands out amongst the hundreds of other books that are out there that's been traditionally published, and this definitely does. You would look at it and immediately want to pick it up. Like the colours are gorgeous. It's bright and it draws you in. So I would definitely have walked past this in a shop and picked it up to have a look at what it was about, read the blurb, and then bought it because I would have loved the blurb as well. So, but yes, and Jenny, she's really lovely. Like I said, I met her this year, not that long ago. So I can imagine you two getting on working well together.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she's actually working on my next cover at the moment. So,
As
but
this
yeah,
part of
she's
you have to write so many books. You're writing how many books is it before?
Yeah, so well, I mean, I was gonna chat about this a bit later on. I think you're gonna ask me about future books, but yeah, the plan is to publish. Well, the plan is, it might not work out that way, to publish 12 books in the next 3 years. So, um, yeah,
That's amazing, Stuart. That's a lot of
yeah,
work.
it is a lot of work, and we were chatting beforehand that I'm really busy at the moment with everything, and you have to plan so far ahead when you're doing it all yourself. You don't have like a project manager at your publisher or an agent who's nudging you to submit things, and so you can get them out. And so yeah, basically I'm getting that cover made at the moment for the next book. And then as soon as that one's finished, I'll essentially be getting the next cover made for the next book and so on. So it'll just be like a continuation. The thing with self-publishing is as well, and a lot of people, I guess, there's people don't talk about it as much, especially in for Kidlit. There's a lot of people talk about self-publishing for adult books and so on, but the key thing with self-publishing is that you're not going to make, and this is probably true of trad, to be fair, you're probably not going to make a living on one or two books. There's very
Mm.
few people that can do that, and so the key is getting lots of books out there. They talk about it's the race to 10 and the marathon to 20. They
Oh,
talk about in
haven't I
terms
heard
of
that
books.
before?
Yeah, so if you
Mm.
want to earn the median UK salary, the average number of books for someone who earns that is 10. And if you want to earn £50,000 a year, which is obviously above median, but is a good living, then you need about on average 20 books for that. Um, I'm in a number of Facebook groups actually. One's called, I think it's called 20 Books to 50K. And it's specifically targeted at people that that want to make a living from their writing, and they talk about the steps. Some people have done it, and they talk about the steps they've gone through and how they do that, and that's one of the biggest strategies. But the key thing, because some people might hear me saying this and think you're just rushing out books just to get books out there. The key thing is obviously just to maintain quality and make sure that your books are still good, well told stories that kids are going to want to read, because ultimately you're judged. That's what you're judged on, isn't it? And if I have to go slower just to produce better quality books, then I'll do that. But I'm also quite driven and motivated when I've got the bit between my teeth about something. So um, that's the plan at the moment, anyway.
Wow, that's huge. I'm
Yeah.
just in awe. Like I've been trying to write my YA for a whole year, so I would never be one of those people that can write 10 books within 3 years. You said, didn't you? That's amazing.
Yeah.
I've got to take some tips when we'll talk about some tips and stuff. I'm going to have to be taking them down because I need as much help as I can get.
Yeah. Honestly, though, the thing to remember as well is, so obviously I have been writing now for a long, long time, and you do get to know yourself, and you know what you're capable of in terms of your output, and yeah, I think it helps when you've done it for a long time. Whereas if someone was writing their first book, then it would be crazy for them to think that they're going to produce even 2 or 3 books a year, let alone,
Mm.
double figures. So yeah.
Wow. Well, good luck with that, because I'll be following your journey within all these books, because it's amazing. And so we'll talk
Yeah,
about another
thanks.
book. I've
Yeah,
only just started reading this, because congratulations, it is not long came out. It came out on the 30th of August. Is that right?
yep,
So it's called The Nameless, and it's your YA, and another debut, but a YA debut this time. So, and again, the cover that's a fab cover, isn't it? Look at that. It really, that again, the colour bits of the fire there around the side is just bright, and you want to pick it up.
yeah.
So if you want to, can you tell us a bit more about this, and how's the journey going so far? It's 12 days,
Yeah.
it's 12 days old.
Yeah, I wrote this book actually a few years ago. It was basically, so the reason why I wanted to release this one was because it was basically the first book that I ever wrote where I got good external feedback on it. Where critique partners or other people that had read it, or when I entered it in competitions or whatever, that it got some positive feedback. It got listed for a few, it came runner up in another one, and when I sent it out to agents, I got a lot of full requests on it. Ultimately, nobody signed me for it, but I figured that it must have had something to get such a positive response. And so I've been working on it a little bit over the last few years, but especially this year, I really focused on it. And it went through quite a few versions and iterations. It was funny because I actually compared it to the version that I had back in 2016, I think it was, to the current version, and it's so different. It was dual point of view back then. Even the voice was just different. My writing then was much more minimalist than it is now as well. And you see all these differences and changes through doing editing of an older manuscript. But yeah, it's been through the ringer, this one, and it's been around for a while. But it's one that feels quite personal to me, because I think some of the internal crises and conflict that are faced by the main character are ones that I've certainly experienced in my life, and so I try to channel a lot into that. Things like suddenly losing your identity, and about your whole worldview suddenly collapsing around you. That's the big themes in the book. And then trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do next? Where do I go now with my life? Who am I? What's my role? And because he lives in a society where you don't have a name until you earn it at age 16. And without spoiling the plot, you can probably guess what happens. But he's going through the book just trying to establish who he is. And so that, as I say, that was a big thing that I was. There's a big part of me in that, and I'm hoping that other people might see that. And it also follows a lot of the tropes and themes of the books that I loved when I first really started getting into like YA books and reading, back during the YA boom time for books, when they were certainly very popular 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah, so
So
we're thinking like Hunger Games sort of time.
yeah, for sure. So I'm definitely utilizing a lot of those kind of tropes, but also more recent, inspirations like I watched The Last of Us at the start of
Yeah,
this year, and I know that I definitely channeled a lot of what I saw in that into some of the newer scenes that I crafted within the book. And so yeah, anyway, so that's how the book came about. And yeah, obviously I launched it while I had COVID, so I didn't actually do an awful lot. It came out quite quietly, but weirdly enough, I don't know if it's just because it's YA, but it's selling better than the middle grade
oh,
book that I
okay.
wrote. Yeah,
Well, YA
and
is so huge at the moment, isn't it? It's massive.
yeah, and things like marketing for YA is much easier than marketing for middle grade, because you've got
Mhm.
you can directly tap into the people who are going to be reading your book, whereas with middle grade the access to 8 to 12-year-olds is thankfully minimal. Like you can't like advertise directly to them, so that's probably a big part of it too. But yeah, so it's going well. I'm really happy. And I should say, you mentioned the cover earlier on. That was designed by Tom Sanderson. who is a brilliant cover designer. He's worked with all the big publishers. He did James Patterson's one of his most recent books. He did Kezia Lupo's most recent book as well. He's done a Stephen King book too.
It's like the Let's
So
Play Was it Let's Play Murder?
that's the one.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've recently read that. That was really
Yeah. So he's a very experienced cover designer. So I knew I was in capable hands with it, and you can definitely get that early 2010s
good. Yeah.
YA vibe from the cover, I think,
Yeah,
which is what we were going
definitely.
for.
It's all this part that really rings it out to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I live in the past. I still feel like I live in the, well, I say 80s and 90s really, but when I think of 2000s, I'm like, that's 5 years ago, right? No,
Yeah.
20.
No, I'm the same. I'm the same.
Yeah,
It just feels like a couple of years ago, but it's obviously not.
yeah. I mean, we'd write something that's based in the 90s, and it's like historic fiction now. That's just not
Oh,
right, is it? It's not right.
yeah. I actually wrote a book that was partly set in the 90s and sent it to agents, and they said it's not historical enough yet to be
Oh,
considered historical. So I actually felt quite good about that as a kid
yeah.
of the 90s. So yeah,
Oh,
there you go.
that's good to know. I'm gonna not say that anymore then, because
Yeah,
my book is there's parts of it that are 90s based. So yeah, I won't class it as historical now. So that's good to know. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. So because you've published. Sorry, I've lost myself for a moment there. So
no, you're
you
fine.
we spoke about self-publishing,
Yeah,
and you've mentioned some really just how you went and done it, but how can you give us some like people that are looking to self-publish their books, because I think it's so important that to people to know that option is there, and it's a really good option to look at if you really what you believe in your book and you want your book out there, you want it in the hands of people to read it, and you want to have some control over when you want it out, how you want it to look. It's such a good option to consider, if you can financially afford to do so, if
yeah.
you want to maybe run like a Kickstarter campaign or something like that. There are options. And you've done this so successfully. So do you have any tips, any self-publishing do's and don'ts at all?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say just before I talk about the tips is that I read at least 10, 20 stories every year through all the things we do with WriteMentor, the competitions and so on. And I'm just like, that story should be published. That needs to, kids need to read that. That is a brilliant story. And then sometimes, it doesn't get picked up by agents or whatever. And then people just put it to the side. And I always think that is such a shame. That those brilliant stories are not getting into the hands of young readers that could really benefit from them and enjoy them. And that's part of the reason I think why I wanted to go down that route. For me personally was, and it's not that I have a too much self belief or anything, but I've had enough feedback from people to suggest that the books that I've read could be important to some children. That they could enjoy them and so on. And I've done quite a few online school visits. I did a few last summer term before the holidays there, and some of the kids really benefited from that. I had this kid who ended up doing a one-to-one call with me with his teacher present, obviously, because he was such a space nut and he wanted to chat
Oh
to me about.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, and
how lovely is that?
it
That's
was
amazing.
it was incredible, and it made me realise that um, I don't need to go down a certain route in order to get my kids to read my books, to become enthusiastic as a result of reading them as well. And that was a big thing for me. It really justified me, putting in all the and this is the thing that I'll talk about in a minute, but it's a huge commitment of time and effort and obviously finances as well, depending on how you do it. Now, it was good that you mentioned there something like a Kickstarter, because I know so many successful self-published authors who use Kickstarters. I know an author who recently did one for, I think it's his fourth book, but so he's got a bit of a following now. But he managed to raise £25,000 from his Kickstarter,
Oh
and
my
yeah, so
goodness, that is amazing.
yeah, so that if you have a bit of a following, and you don't have to have a huge following, but a bit of a following, people who are enthusiastic about the book that you're trying to produce, people will back it. There's other ones. Is it Unbound as well? Is that right?
I don't
Um,
know. I don't know about that one.
I think Unbound, I think they are actually a publisher, but they basically do a Kickstarter model where
Oh,
they
okay.
they get people to contribute towards the publication costs, and if enough people do that, then they'll publish it. So there are alternatives to you obviously paying out your own pocket
Okay.
from the start.
Oh,
Yeah, I can maybe tweet a few of the different ways in which you can do it. After we get off chatting here, and people can look those up if they're interested. But for me, anyway, the way I viewed it was I wanted to treat it like a business. And and a lot of people just a lot of people just want to write and they don't want to deal with the financial side of things, and that's why one of the big reasons why they want to go trad, because they'll just get a royalty check every 6 months, and that's all they have to do. But I'm a control enthusiast, so I like to kind of go all in with things, and so I made a business plan for the next 5 years. I set up an actual business, so I have my publisher that publishes my books as a business. Um,
okay.
I've got like business bank account. I took out a loan to get started. Blah blah blah. So I treated it like a proper startup business, and I think when you treat what you're doing like that, then I do think that pays dividends in terms of being organised and so on. Because I sometimes think that self-publishing sometimes gets a bit of a bad name because people simply don't invest in the editorial or the covers that they should do for their books, and so
Mhm.
therefore they're maybe not as good as they should be. Um, and and I think this is a tip that I was going to mention later on, but I think it's so important. I always view that the money you don't spend on investing in your book, you're going to lose that amount of money and then some, multiply that by a factor of 100 by
Mm.
not doing those things. So if you have a brilliant cover and you get your book really well edited, the amount of money you'll make as a result of that will far exceed the amount that you put into it initially. And so, for me anyway, I wanted to make sure I did that at the start. And I'm not viewing this as a short-term thing. It's definitely a long-term project. This, and I won't make my money back in my books within 6 months. It might take 2 years. It might take 5 years or 10 years, but that's fine because I'm not looking at writing as a short-term thing. And I think that's probably a good lesson for everyone as a writer is to think about that. Don't think about this book as your career, because even if you get that book traditionally published and it's your first book, what do you have to do immediately? You have to tell the publisher what your next book's going to be, give them a pitch, give them a synopsis. What are you planning to do next? And
Yeah.
and so it's good training to have all that planned out in advance, especially if you want to make this a career for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we often think we're just getting that first book out there and that's it. We're like that. We put all our effort into that, and just think, oh, we'll just fly from then on. Like that will sell. We'll do really well. But no, there is a lot more to it. And what you said about treating it like a business, having that business plan and that mindset, I can really see how much that will really help the way you work and excel as well and be out there in the hands of people if you've made this plan. I think that's a really great tip. If for people that are looking to self-publish, definitely take that on board because yeah, it's not something that I'm not the most organized of people, so it's probably not something that I would have thought of. But I've not yet come to that self-publishing part of my journey, so I've not thought about that yet. I'm, as you know, looking for a trad publishing deal at some point in the future, whenever that may be. But I think having that business plan, that idea, knowing that this is a if you want this as a career, you've got to continuously work on it. You have to get your book out there, make it as best as it can be, like you said with the cover. I've spoke to a couple of people who have self-published and they've all kind of said similar things, um, about it needs to be out, like the cover needs to be really good so people will look at it. You don't want someone just to walk straight past it, and just think, and it sounds horrible when you say it, but just go, oh, that's someone who's just self-published, like, because there are books, and especially there are books out there that you see that are maybe by other publishers that aren't what we say legit, or should we say, I'm not sure, and you can
Yeah,
tell that by just the cover that that's not done properly or is good, but that story could be so good, but it's not going to draw the attention of people. So really just, look for the right people to design it, to do any illustrations, whether it's a picture book or younger illustrated fiction, or whether that you want someone to do the cover like you've done with Ghost of Mars, to get it perfect as you see, and you and the illustrator see it, because it's a joint effort, isn't it? Definitely.
Yeah, and I honestly, I genuinely believe you have to have total faith and belief in your own work, and because if you don't, then nobody else will. I always think that's such a powerful mindset to have, because it's very rare for just other people to spontaneously start talking about your book and and doing all your promotion for you. That rarely happens. You have to lead that, and you have to be your own biggest advocate. Because if you're not, then people will say, well, actually, if the author themselves isn't that enthusiastic about their own book, then why should I be as a reader? Why should I invest $7.99 in buying their book if the author themselves isn't, shouting from the rooftops about their book? And I think I put a wee thing in my notes to respond to in this question, which was, I said, don't put your book baby in the corner, because and it's like I think it's a good quote though to remember, because um, some people will be a little bit snobby about self-published books, and I have definitely encountered that over the last 6 months. Whether when I've had doors closed to me because the book's self-published, and so on, and that's fine. I'm everyone has their own requirements for various things, but I think you just have to ignore those voices, that come from people who are like that, and only let in the voices of support or amplification, or who are lifting you up. And you've got to add to that as well. You've got to funnel all of that positive goodwill and all the good feedback and so on you get, and just channel it as positively as you can. You should be, and I personally think that you should be very proud, or even prouder, to have self-published a book, because of the amount of work that goes in. You are a formatter, you are partially an editor. I know you hire editors, but you have to do a lot of work that editors would do in-house. You have to be the publicist, you have to be the marketer, you have to be the distributor. There's so many roles that within a publisher, 6 or 7 people would do, that you have to do yourself. And so I think if you've gone through that process, then you should be very proud of your work, rather than being a little bit shy about shouting about it. And I think most people that know me know that I'm not hugely shy online when it comes to doing that. But it's because I'm proud of what I've done so far, because it is a huge deal. And I think sometimes we think, I don't know, we maybe think that self-published books aren't as good as traditionally published books for whatever reason. But actually, the person who self-published a book has done way more work than the traditionally published author.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't always mean, like, I think some people might think, oh, they've self-published because they couldn't get a traditionally published deal, but that's not the case. Like,
Well,
some people
well,
just
not
want to self-publish. They want to be in control of how their book sells, of how much money they earn from it, and when it goes out. When it comes to traditionally publishing, you could be waiting years before it's out there, but that your book's ready to be in the hands of people, and you want it out there. You do what you've got to do that's right for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I probably don't mention this enough, but I have had traditional publishers offer me deals for my books. I have had an agent before. I have had, as recently as last year, I had an agent offer who wanted to pitch my book at London Book Fair back in, was it April of last year? As part of like me signing with them and so on. But sometimes you've got to have faith in what you want to do, in the direction you want to go with things and so on. And it's like, just because I've chosen to go down this path doesn't mean to say that A, that I couldn't have gone down the other path, or B, that I never want to go down that path, because you never know what direction you might pivot in the future.
Hmm.
This is just a means for me at the moment to be able to get my books out to readers directly, without having to go through the circus, the merry-go-round that traditional publishing is. And I imagine I'd signed with that agent last year, even if my book sold very quickly, which it probably wouldn't have. I'd be debuting in what, 2025, 2026.
Hmm.
And for me, that it was, I felt like it was more important at this stage of my life, and for what I wanted out of my writing, that I just went ahead and did it myself.
Yeah, and you should be so proud of yourself for doing that, because it's amazing. And we all, when we all starting out, when we learn about how you get books out there, we all learn you need an agent, and they'll send it out to publishers for you. But it's so refreshing to hear your take on it and your experiences, that you've had an agent, that you didn't sign a deal that was offered to you, that wasn't right for you at that point. It doesn't mean it's not ever going to be right for you, but not,
Yeah,
it's just not right, not right now, for instance. It's just,
and I
but
think
it
this
may
this
be one day. And
yeah, and I think people get so obsessed with this writing thing sometimes, about the obsession about getting an agent, the obsession about getting a publishing deal. You've got to remove that rosy veil sometimes, and look more closely at things and think, actually, is this what I want? Like, look at what's actually been offered to you. Is this the route that I want to go down? And for some people, they're so obsessed with the fairy tale of being published that they don't look at the actual nitty gritty of it. And I'm fortunate to have a lot of traditionally published author friends who are very candid with me about their experiences and what it's actually like in reality. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to go down this route. Was I was like, I don't want to be, you know, writing 5 or 6 books for a publisher and then just get dropped for no real
yeah,
reason, or be out on submission to publishers for 18 months and not get any replies, or
it's
all these
hard.
things. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard and it hurts.
yes,
I've been out for a year with picture books, and none of those, there was a very close call, we won't talk about that, but none of those have sold, and it's hard. It's
yeah.
so hard out there. And it's hard across the board, but obviously, as you know, picture books are like, yeah, I'm not concentrating on those at the moment, but it's, yeah, you need, from either, whether you're traditionally publishing or self-publishing, you need to have an inner strength to know that this is right for you and you want
Yeah.
to carry on, because it would be so easy to just go, I'm rubbish, I'm not good, because it can really make you feel like that. Some feedback is great that you get from publishers when you're out on submission. Some are just so cold as well, and it's just, you're like, oh, I just feel, it's, yeah, well, it's, you just don't feel like worthy.
There's,
But know that you are, and yeah, it's
but
hard out there.
we're in a moment in time where there's far too many talented authors and not enough slots to get published, and that's the reality of it.
Hmm.
Even if you're very, very good, you still have got quite a low chance of being traditionally published. And a lot of it comes down to luck, taste, timing, and all these other elements, which are nothing to do with you personally. And so, as I say, it's really good that there is this other channel opening up, and it's becoming more and more exciting, the whole self-publishing field. Like, we're looking at things like direct sales now, where we're even looking at methods to skip out the traditional distributors like Amazon and Ingram Spark and so on. How can
Okay.
we directly sell our books ourselves? And there's a lot more mechanisms and distribution lanes and so on to be able to do that, and to print your own books. Do offset printing, print 1,000 copies of your own books and get them distributed and stored in a warehouse yourself.
Hmm.
And obviously, you take a much bigger cut of the royalties. It's miserable when you look at a contract that says you're going to get 8% on a paperback that's reduced to 2.99 in Tesco.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Whereas, if you do the thing yourself, you can keep often like 70-80% of the royalties through direct sales. And so it becomes a different ball game. You don't even
Hmm.
have to sell as many copies. You sell 10 times less and you're still making the same money. So yeah, it's an interesting alternative route for people.
Absolutely, and it's definitely something to consider and really look into, if if you're interested in it.
Yeah.
Don't just look your nose up at it. Such a great option. But I think, and you meant, like you kind of said about earlier, some people just a bit worried about it. Some people maybe are just want to live in this dream of just becoming this huge best-selling author, and don't think that you can do it through self-publishing. But actually, there have been books out there that have done extremely well through self-publishing,
Oh, I mean,
so it can be
honestly,
done.
Yeah, honestly, you think about Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. He self-published that initially.
It's amazing.
Is
Yeah.
it E.L. James who did the 50 Shades as well?
Yeah, that was
That was,
self-published. Yeah.
and there are lots and lots of examples of that. Maz Evans talks about how she self-published Who Let the Gods Out. She did I think a 2,000 book print run, ended up selling a lot
Wow.
of them, and then she got picked up and
That's
like
such a great title, isn't it?
oh, it's amazing.
You would
She's she's
definitely go, I need to read that book. Yeah, that's brilliant.
she's brilliant at titles. Is
Yeah,
Maz.
yeah. And we spoke a bit about it earlier, but we didn't speak about what they are. So do you have any ideas? What's next for Stuart? What's your new books?
Yeah, so I'm just finishing off some of the edits on my middle grade time travel novel that is going to be published ideally before the end of this year. That's the plan. But I'm trying to keep my timelines quite fluid at the moment because again that's one of the advantages of self-publishing is that you're in charge of everything, and just as soon as everything's ready, we can hit publish on it, rather than like I know a few of my friends who hand in their final edits, and then it's still another 9 or 12 months before the book's out there. So yeah, I've got that coming up. I've got book 2 of Ghosts of Mars to write. I have got the outline all plotted. I just need to sit down probably in October, in the month of October, and just write it all in one big go and get the first draft of that out. And I'm planning to publish that in February 24. I've got a few other books as well, which are now finished and just need to go through the editing process and get covers for, and they'll also be out next year. And I'll also be writing subsequent sequels to both the books that are already out over the next year as well.
Wow, that's amazing. That's just wow. You're just a powerhouse, Stuart. How do you do this around a full-time job? You're a teacher, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm a
Yeah,
biology teacher for my sins.
and a parent and run WriteMentor and do all this. I'm just in awe of you. How do you find the time?
Um, honestly, like I always give this answer, but it's so true. You end up just having to make sacrifices of things that you normally would want to do. So you've just got to say, actually, instead of doing that thing that I want to do, I have to do the other thing because that I want that more.
Yeah,
And I think that's a big part of being a writer is you've got to want to write more than most of the things in your life because otherwise you just put it off forever.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely true. Absolutely. Um, I can see that we're getting close to the hour, and unfortunately, Instagram, when this goes live, it will not do more than an hour. So, you mentioned earlier that you've got a whole plot for your next book. So I'm taking it that
Yes.
you're a plotter more so than a
Yeah,
pantser.
yeah, but I've learned the hard way because my first couple of books that I wrote, I just pantsed them, and like they were all over the place. See, trying to fix a book after you've pantsed a whole 70,000 to 80,000 word book, and try to fix the plot afterwards, you just end up cutting so much stuff, and a completely miserable process. So what I've started doing more often, more recently, is I've been plotting out my books in advance, and that way you tend to get a closer first draft to what it's eventually going to become, and it's just a lot less painful later on. Um, and I've written down here: you either have fun up front and pay for it later with miserable edits, or you just take your medicine initially and do the boring stuff, the plotting, but then you make your life easier in the future.
Oh yeah, what do you prefer? Just some people just totally pants. I mean, I think it depends. Like for my YA, I've plotted, although for the first one, I'd wrote like half of it, and I've completely rewritten it when I plotted it out. So it's completely different, and it's very similar to like you said. I would even say the voice is different. It's written in different tense. It's a completely different story mostly. So yeah, I'm definitely a plotter when it comes to older children's, but when it comes to younger, I'm more of a pantser. I would say maybe not picture books. I like to plot those out, but younger fiction, yeah, I can. I feel like there's less words to rewrite if needed.
Yeah, no, pantsing is so much. It's way more fun, but um, it's only fun in the moment. It's like when you have your third or fourth glass of wine when you really should have stopped. In the moment you're absolutely loving it, but you pay for it later.
Yeah. Oh, the wine headache in the morning, not good. Yeah. So we can't leave without talking about WriteMentor, because as everybody knows, and I feel like I must be so annoying, I love WriteMentor and I'm always telling people to join it. Um, it's just the most supportive place. It's full of so many wonderful people at all different stages of their writing careers, who, and everybody is there for each other. And everything that's available in the hub is recently changed. Definitely, I would say for the better. There is so much more to offer for everybody, that now the levels have come out and everybody just pays the one price, which is the lower price, I would say. So everybody needs to take advantage of this. And there's so much to offer in the hub, and just a brilliant place to get to know people, as well as all the, you've got the courses on there, you've got the free modules that you can do. It's just a brilliant place. So how how did that come about? How did you think, right, okay, I'm going to start this organization, and how it's flourished, and it's a brilliant place. You must be so proud of what you've done, and the rest
Yeah.
team, Florian and
Yes.
Melissa, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I know it's grown a lot, way beyond what I expected at the start. Basically, at the time that I decided to start WriteMentor, I was with an agent and I had a publishing deal at the time.
Mhm.
I was supposed to be published in 2019 for my first book, and I thought at that stage I would quite like to set up something where me and a couple of other authors would just mentor, a few authors at the beginning of their journey and sort of help them through it. And it was one of those where I thought there'd be 5 or 6 of us, and we ended up getting like 40 odd people signing up to it. And that was, that was in the first year we did it, and that was just the voluntary mentoring program during the summer. And then
Oh,
of
when did
course
it
we
start? Sorry, what year did it start?
2018.
Okay.
2018. And then, yeah, basically every year it just got bigger and we added things. People were asking for courses, people were asking for this and that. So we added a number of things. And then as it got bigger, obviously, I was finding it difficult to do everything on my own. So Florian helped me out. Initially, she was just supposed to come in and help me out with some social media and stuff. But then, she's brilliant with like graphic design, and she does all the website stuff and so on. So, she's really helped me out in that side of things. And then we grew, and and a lot of what I realized after we were running it for a while was that, like, we don't run it for any profitable reason or whatever. We just wanted to make it as accessible as possible at as low a price as possible to as many writers as we could, because looking out there just now, if you look for writing courses or help online for writing, there's a lot of big numbers out there when
Hmm.
you're looking around. And I wanted to create something that was very affordable for people, especially those who are on lower income. And that is essentially, always been what our ethos has been at WriteMentor. We're always just looking at how we can squeeze things to get more value but lower cost into everything we do. Um, and obviously Melissa and Emily joined us as well. They're both, published authors. They have a vast, wide range of experience with various things. So we've got a really good team now of people who I think can empathise with the writer journey. That whole thing of writing a book from scratch, editing it, sending it out to an agent, or a bunch of agents, waiting 6 months, not hearing anything, then having to write your second book, pick yourself up from, possibly 20, 30, 40 rejections, and then do it all over again and all over again. And I think because we have that experience, we want to be able to create a community where people can share those with each other. And as you say, on the hub, we've got award-winning authors there who are part of
Yeah.
the hub, and similarly, we've got people who haven't finished a book yet, and it's a really nice blend of people that we have. And it's something that yeah, I'm really proud of, that as a thing that wasn't meant to be very big but has grown into something that I think a lot of people find quite invaluable, and it provides a lot of their social networking as a writer, with fellow writers and so on.
Absolutely.
Especially with the way social media is going, it's harder to directly communicate, for example, through the old Twitter or the other social media channels. To have that point there where everyone can come and meet and chat is really important for me.
Yeah. And I've like made friends that I will be friends with for life through it. So it's not just about the writing. It brings just amazing friendships to you, and people that I think unless you write, you have no idea how it takes over your life, and the processes of it, and how hard it is, and how much you of yourself you have to put into it. So having like-minded people around you is so important on your journey. And yeah, I thank you so much for just this, I don't know what word I'm looking for, just for making it happen, because it's the most wonderful place. I absolutely love it, and I will always champion it and get people involved. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. That's nice
Okay.
to hear.
Oh, that's good. But I know everybody who's joined it love it. And the fact that even when it comes to the competitions and how open you are about what's involved, and just knowing how hard it is just to send your work out to somebody, whether it's part of a competition, whether it's submission or querying, is make sure everyone is well looked after. Their mental health is so important, and it really shows in everything that you do. So it's just brilliant. And like I said, you said it as well earlier. You want it out there for people. It's affordable. It's because it's expensive to write and to be involved in the communities, and to even to enter competitions and stuff like that. Sometimes it can be so expensive, but you're always so aware of keeping your costs as low as possible. And I know that you do all this voluntarily yourself, and yeah, it's amazing,
Yeah.
and just so grateful. And I know that everybody who I know on the hub, it all feel the same. So from me and from everybody that I know, we thank you, because that's
Oh,
amazing.
that's nice. I'm a bit red now. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but that is nice to hear.
So well, we have gone over, but other people, if
Yep.
they can always listen on YouTube anyway. So
Yeah, yeah.
some quick top tips for aspiring children's authors.
Yeah, so I wrote these down because I didn't want to waffle too much when we got to this stage. So the first one I've written down is think more than you write at first, but then write more than you think later on. So when you're beginning your novel, there should be a lot more thinking than writing. But then once you actually start writing your novel, there should be very little thinking and more writing. And I've found that approach really benefits me, because if you do all your problem solving ahead of time before you've written too many words, then you will avoid those as you go through, and it means that your writing will be much quicker, and you'll be able to complete your drafts much more quickly. And I think that's probably the biggest tip that I have.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And actually, I had Ian Eagleton on a while back, and he thought about his book for 5 months before he started writing it. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's knowing that's I'm too impulsive, unfortunately. I wish that I could do that. I'm yeah, it's the whole ADHD thing. I think I have too many things going on, and I have no patience to think about stuff, so I just have to write it all. But I think it's such a good tip, and I do try, and I would love to be able to do that. But I think for people that can, it's so important. So that's a great tip.
Yeah, and the second one I had, and this is probably just as important, is always make it fun. And when the fun does stop when you're writing, stop and evaluate why, and remove whatever it is that's stopping it from being fun. I've written down usually it's querying or worrying about things you can't control, like the whims and tastes of this weird sort of debut celebrity fetish industry that we have. You know, and you can't control any of that stuff. So the best thing you can do with your writing is just always make it fun, and try and eliminate all those other thoughts from your head if possible. I think that honestly that so just over a year ago I made the decision that I wasn't going to query again for a long time, and the improvement in my mental health, the improvement in my writing productivity, how much more fun I find it, and how much more in love with the process I am, is honestly it can't be mapped, the change that I've had in that. I've spent years just thinking, constantly as I was writing books, thinking, will an agent like this? Will a publisher like this? You know, blah 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 blah. And it really does inhibit your flow
Mhm.
when it comes to being a creative. And so I think the number one most important thing is always make it fun and don't think about all the other stuff you can't control.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great tip. Write because you love what you're writing rather than write because you want to get that published. Like, just if you have this story to tell, then tell it. Like, tell it for because you need to tell it. Don't tell it because you hope it will be out there on the shelves. That's a bonus, obviously. But if you've got this story inside you, just let it free because you love it. Whether you know, I really enjoy this part of my. I really enjoy writing my YA, but it's a really difficult book for me because there's a lot of um, like it's quite a truthful. There's lots of stuff in it that's happened to me, and it's not that great. So it could be really hard to have to. So if you're writing anything like that, I would say like I just for me, I'd have to come away from it for a while and evaluate why I'm doing it. I really and know that I'm doing this for the reason that I need it out there in other people's hands that may be experiencing similar things, like domestic abuse and stuff. So it could be really hard, but I also really love getting it out. It's like a it's some sort of form of therapy for sure, definitely, and it really it's really helping, but it can be tough. But perseverance and keeping on is the key, but only if you feel like you can it's not detrimental to your mental health because that's really important.
Yeah, and I really believe that writing should be a cathartic thing, and that we should feel better after having done it rather than worse. And
Hmm.
sadly, you know, with the way the industry works and so on, you do see people's. You know, I think there was a report out recently, wasn't there, about the mental health of authors who'd been published and how they felt like, you know, a year after their debut and so on. And it wasn't, you know, it was quite grim reading. You know how
Hmm.
people were feeling about writing and so on, and it should be a process that you fall in love with and should make you feel better afterwards, I think. And if it's
Yeah,
not, then you have to examine why that is.
yeah. I mean, do you think it's because we're not always prepared for what can happen after? Like, we you think you get the deal and that's it, and the publishers do take over everything, but actually they don't. It's still a lot of it is down to you. There's a lot of work you have to continue doing, and that's through traditionally publishing. You have to be there are yes, they do have publicists and stuff like that, but you're still that main person that has to get that out there. And for some people, that's a really difficult thing to take on board, and that's a huge pressure
Yeah,
for them to deal with. And I think it's just being prepared, having, if you're traditionally published, having your agent speak you through this about what happens after, and the publishers, because I feel publishing isn't the most transparent of places. And I think it's getting better, but it needs to be more so, definitely.
yeah. I mean, so there's so little known about what happens after your books are published, and the problem is that writers quite justifiably are worried about publicly, you know, saying anything or venting or, you know, letting people know about their frustrations, because ultimately they have to please these publishers so they can get their next contract, you know, to pay their mortgage or to pay, you know, whatever it happens to be. And so it's a really tough one, you know. It's like, I guess it's like any industry. You know, if you were an actor, you know, you might have a rubbish experience on set for a film, but you wouldn't necessarily badmouth it, because then you'll be seen as a troublemaker who,
Yeah,
and then you might not get offered future roles. And you know, it's a similar thing with publishing, isn't it? You don't want to burn your bridges with people.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just unknown, isn't it? Especially
Mm,
well, for me and for many people that will probably be watching this who are still looking for publishing deals or agents or whatever way their journey is heading. It's also unknown and exciting, but scary too, I think. But keep that
yeah.
excitement going because
Yes, you got.
if you love what you do, then carry on.
Yeah, always got. It's always got to be enjoyable.
Definitely. Oh, that's a great note to end it on. It always has to be enjoyable. Thank you, Stuart. It's been so great to chat to you. Thank you again for coming on earlier. Thank you again for coming on later the next week. Yeah, I'm to this. you've been very good to work with, because yeah, I'm sorry, I've not, this is the first time I actually had to postpone anything, so I was really worried, but thank you so much for your
I,
understanding.
I was going to say to you earlier on, I'm so impressed that you like. I don't know how many episodes you've done now, but you have been continually doing them every Thursday. Routine, and no, it's really impressive because it can be hard. I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to, unfortunately, I'm starting full-time work on Monday.
Yeah.
Um, I'll tell you after, but
Okay.
I've not yet signed the contract, so I can't say who it's with. But um, I will have to probably do Kidlit Live once a month once I've caught up with everybody. So up until I'm fully booked until the end of October, with weekly guests. So from then on, I will probably do once a month, maybe bi-monthly, depending on how I'm coping with full-time work and writing. But yeah, I love it. I love chatting to people, and to be fair, I'm probably quite more I'm like an introverted extrovert. I think if you there's work like when I'm around people I'm fine, but actually when before that I don't want to do anything. I very much just want to stay at home. But once I'm out there, I love chatting to people, and I love just getting to know people and communicating with everyone and just having fun. It's just great. So this has been great for me, and I'm really enjoying it. Most weeks chatting to people about books, because it's the best thing ever. um, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm really, really, really delighted you asked me to come on and chat to you, and I've had a great time.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Me too. Thanks so much, Stuart. And hopefully we'll, sometime in the future we'll be able to have you on again and chat about more. And there'll be more pictures around us too here.
Yeah, I've got to say your graphic design's brilliant.
This another Canva thing. I mean, literally, that was very easy to do. I'm not the most tech savvy, but yeah, this streaming service is pretty straightforward. Thankfully,
Yeah,
this wouldn't be happening. But yeah, thank you so much, and I'll no doubt I'll speak to you soon. But thanks, Stuart.
no worries.
Good luck
Thanks,
with
everyone.
everything. See you
Bye.
later. Well, I could have chatted to Stuart for ages. That was great. I've loved having him on the show. And I just urge everyone to go out and read his books. Like I said, I've only started reading The Nameless, and I absolutely love it. So just go out there, look it up on Amazon, and you can just enjoy them because they are fabulous. So next week on Thursday, I'm joined by Hannah Moffat. I'm really excited to chat to her. I've got some great questions to ask her about her books. I don't know if you've read them, but there's Small Bites Back. This is off the top of my head. I'm now totally pantsing this, because usually I have my diary and I've written everything down. But I've not brought it with me today. But yeah, Small Bites Back by Hannah Moffat, and she's going to be joining me next Thursday on the 21st. Have I got that date right? And can't wait to chat to her. So I'll see you all then, and have a lovely week.